Now, a number of other things that are interesting about things like these polls and who has the rights to do what and who has to have a Section 30 order. But if we take the basic premise, the claim that the United Kingdom is a union of equals in which it is voluntary and either party can leave any time they like, if you take it at face value, then you have to wonder why it is that England is already independent. Because it makes all its own decisions, it spends all its own money, it also spends our money as well on things that we never see. So the English government, should it wish to end the union, doesn't have to do anything. It already is independent. It is simply taking control of Scotland. So why do we have to sign a Section 30 order and ask permission in order to vote on whether we like the union or not? Well, the answer to that is we don't. And it's a very simple answer because international law supports self-determination, which interestingly is a universal right which applies to everyone in the United Nations and was enthusiastically championed by none other than the British state back in the days after World War II, when they wanted the whole of Europe to be at peace and nobody to be invading each other, and for there to be no wars, and for everyone to be happy. And to that end, they've largely succeeded, except for Scotland. For some reason, the British state sees Scotland as not a country, not subject to international laws, and not subject to the rules of the United Nations. Why is that? Well, because it suits their purpose. They want all the oil resources, they want the gas resources, they want the cheap, in fact they want the extremely cheap electrical power that we supply them, which we have to pay them to supply to them. So everything at the moment is stacked in favour of the UK. Now the UK I'm using as a blanket term to describe England, because England is effectively already independent, doesn't need to ask Scotland's permission even to have a vote on whether it ends the union or not, because they're unaffected by the union. They are de facto, if you want to use the term, independent. England is already independent. So if it is a union of equals, why is Scotland not independent to do its own thing as well? We should have precisely the same rights as the people of England and the English Parliament. They should be equal. But they obviously are not. Now, it's been known for some time, particularly a few months ago, in fact many months ago, I think somewhere in the range of 2 years ago, a former diplomat and one of the British representatives at the UN who helped to formulate the entire policy of self-determination for the United Nations said quite plainly that under the terms of the United Nations Charter, Scotland could have a referendum on its own independence at any time it liked, under international law. It doesn't need to ask anyone's permission at all. And there would be nothing unlawful about it, and there would be nothing that the United Kingdom could do to stop it. So the question in my mind is, why are we still waiting? Because we're in a situation now where the United Kingdom is rapidly circling the drain in terms of its economic life, draining away as we speak. Rishi Sunak is pretty useless, pretty much a balsa wood Prime Minister, has all the impact of a mouse parachuting into cotton wool. He's not the man to lead this country, and I'm talking about Scotland now, out of the recession which his own party has manufactured, and out of these massively high energy prices which his own party has manufactured, into some new future where Scotland is able to take its own decisions and can end the union. It's not going to happen, but it should. And it should happen right away. There is no reason now for the SNP to wait any longer. In fact, even at their conference on the 19th of March, they could drastically change policy and just decide to rip up this idea of having a de facto referendum and actually just have a real referendum in which we actually vote yes or no to independence. Because there is nothing under international law which would prevent us. And the International Court of Justice, according to this United Nations former diplomat, would support and uphold the result of such a referendum, because it's not applying English laws to this. They haven't made up some rule that Scotland can't vote. In fact, they've made up a rule which says we can vote. And not only that, but the British state actually agreed to it and were one of the signatories to the whole idea in the first place. So this idea that Scotland is some kind of exception to international rules is crap. And I'm using the word crap on purpose. It's complete garbage. We are a country, we've been a country for well over 1,000 years. We've been an independent state, declared independent state, accepted by all in Europe and the developed world at the time in 1320. And we have a codified constitution called the Claim of Right, which guarantees those rights, which has been deliberately misinterpreted and abridged and edited by the British state so that it never mentions our sovereignty and it never mentions our right to self-determination in any form. But that doesn't mean any of it has gone away. It's just it's been hidden from you for 315 years. So what I'm saying here is, don't believe these polls. Lord Ashcroft is at it as usual. He's doing his political thing for the Tory party and for the Union. And like everything else that's going on in the press at the moment, it's designed to make you feel hopeless. So don't feel hopeless. Nothing has changed. We still have the same amount of supporters. We still have the same number of people wanting independence. The problem at the moment is that many of us are getting poorer and poorer, and it's becoming more difficult now for us to take a decision to gain independence because our daily lives are so blighted by the way the United Kingdom is mismanaged that we're living day to day at the moment. And I know that David McGuinness pointed this out the other day. It's actually harder now for the working classes of Scotland, the people at the bottom of the pile. It's harder for them to get behind an idea like independence without knowing how things are going to improve and how fast they're going to improve for that section of society, which, let's face it, forms the majority of the working population of this country. There are some good pieces of news, however. I noticed somebody passed me a piece of information today that showed that there's over a million, I think 1.2 million pounds is being invested in new green renewable hydrogen production in Aberdeenshire, something which one of the local companies, a family company, has decided that it's time to do it. And they are doubling the workforce, they're buying a new equipment and plant, and they're designing basically hydrogen filling stations for hydrogen-powered cars, all part of the new green environmental economy that Scotland is going to build. But we can't finish this job while we're chained to the UK. So I guess the takeaway from today's programme is this. The United Kingdom and its polls and its newspapers and its propaganda, push all that to the side. Imagine you're living in Russia and they're telling you that the war in Ukraine is going really well. Well, you know from reading the outside media from outside of Russia that that's not the case. And we know from looking at the media and listening to people outside of the UK, particularly in Europe and in the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, foreign diplomats and so on, we know the situation is not as it's portrayed. We have the right to hold a referendum on anything we like at any time we want if it applies to the whole nation and it's important enough. There is no reason why we should wait for a general election to do that. A general election would be a roll of the dice. It's never been done before. It's far harder in order to actually achieve independence. It's much harder to do it through an untried and I would say ambiguous technique like a de facto referendum. The SNP is famous for claiming that the claim of right is ambiguous. I argue the opposite. The claim of right is more clear than almost any other political document that I have ever seen. The people of Scotland are sovereign. They remain sovereign. That sovereignty has never been taken away. We reserve the right to remove any form of government we don't like and replace it with a type of government which we do like. And that is what independence allows us to do. So don't lose heart. Keep the faith and remember, don't believe the polls. The polls could be made to show virtually anything. I mean, last week, the media was championing the idea that 40% of Scots wanted Nicola Sturgeon to go. Not that 60% wanted her to stay. It just depends where they put the emphasis. So, remember, we are actually winning. 60% want Nicola Sturgeon. 75% of yes voters want her to remain. Now, I'm not her biggest fan, but we need a leader. And we need a leader who's competent and respected, and she's both of those things internationally. She needs to get her finger out, though, and the SNP needs to abandon this idea, I think, of the de facto referendum. I have swung one way and the other with this de facto referendum. But the more I think about it and the more time goes by and the worse things get, the more I realise that the international route is the best. Not only is it the best, it's the normal route to independence. No other country has ever tried to do this with a de facto referendum. So why are we doing it? And that's a question I think you should ask your own MSPs and your own local SNP branches. Why are we doing a de facto referendum when we could do an internationally recognised, under international law, referendum on independence specifically? And that is a right of every country in the world, including Scotland. I'll see you soon. Have a great day. Bye for now.